Following the footsteps of episodes on both Toxic Crusaders and RoboCop cartoon shows, oh god, I don't want to think about that second RoboCop cartoon show.
Drop your weapons and come with me. No way!
Let's take a small branching detour. While those two properties were entirely based on severely R-rated IPs with RoboCop and the Toxic Avenger,
Guns!
Swamp Thing was something that existed quite a bit before this cartoon ever came to fruition, and wasn't the first go-around either. The reason why it begs to be discussed, apart from you kind folks asking for it in the comments, is how cult hit it became even with its short run.
You still don't understand the growth formula, do you, Arcane?
It's also a merchandising machine with some of the coolest toys and worst video games to ever come out of a kid's TV show. Swamp Thing, you are amazing, and deserve a look at one of the least preserved kids' quasi-horror TV shows ever put on the small screen. This is what happened to Swamp Thing, the animated series.
You boys picked the wrong place to snoop.
Swamp Thing the character is probably, most commonly associated with DC after a heck of a recent comics run, and even a few appearances in the DC animated universe. But the character wasn't always in the superhero realm.
You dare threaten the green.
He showed up all the way back in 1971 in DC Comics, sure, but it was in their homage to the old EC Comics horror entries. They had a couple going at the time with House of Mystery and House of Secrets, the latter of which is where Big Green first showed its swampy form.
The steering wheel? No!
They were anthology format with topics in fantasy, sci-fi, mystery, and of course horror, which could have any number of topics and characters. The creator of Swamp Thing, Len Wein, even jokes that he was working on a piece for the series and didn't have a title, but he kept telling people he was still working on that quote, Swamp Thing, which would later become the title. A year later, we would get the first issue in Swamp Thing's very own series with, of course, Swamp Thing #1 in November of 1972. The character switched over briefly from his first appearance, which was later adopted by the movies, and nearly every other iteration until the reboot in 2021. The original short story, not really meant to be a series, follows scientist Alexander Olsen, who is killed by his assistant after the assistant falls in love with Alexander's wife. Olsen comes back as the titular Swamp Thing and gets revenge on his killer, but his wife runs off when she can't recognize him for her husband through his monstrous appearance.
So Arcane wants to fight mutant with mutant.
He's left to wander the bayou and becomes a cryptid legend in the Louisiana region. Classic EC comeuppance stuff where the hero gets his revenge but doesn't really win either. This changed slightly when he got his own named series where Alec Holland is the chemist who is killed off by criminals, but he's absorbed into the creation and brought back to life. Or the creation took his memories, it varies.
Alec Holland, he's dead.
He would eventually join forces with John Constantine in Justice League Dark, and even be one of the most powerful creatures in the DC universe. But before that, he was put into a movie by one of the best horror directors to ever do it with Wes Craven's Swamp Thing from 1982. I think this is where a lot of the real horror association comes from, as it was originally featured in a revival of old school horror comics and then put in a movie by one of the most beloved horror directors ever. Oh, and IMDb also lists most of the Swamp Thing properties under horror as one of its tags.
Say hello to your boyfriend, baby.
That 1982 movie and its even more silly sequel, The Return of Swamp Thing, actually pushed more of a superhero narrative than the original comics, even if they typically fall under the horror category. All that mixed together is why I wanted to talk about the cartoon show and why I think it counts for originally not really for kids, because I don't think those movies nor the original comics were necessarily aimed at the kid market.
They must not leave this plantation alive.
Anywho, Swamp Thing gained popularity on small screens not because of today's subject, but because of the live-action series that started in the summer of 1990 on the USA Network.
You coming, Swampy?
You bet.
That thing, pun intended, was at one point the highest rated show on the network and lasted 3 whole years in a whopping 72 episodes that I have fond memories of watching when I was a kid. That leads us, finally, I know, I'm sorry, to the Swamp Thing cartoon show that is so short in its run that it's listed as a TV miniseries on IMDb. Swamp Thing was built for CBS, which turned it down, and it ended up on Fox Kids during its incredibly short run of just 5 episodes.
Earth can really use that kind of science.
The Sci-Fi Channel, or Sci-Fi, would pick it up for syndication just like it did for the live-action version, and sadly, it would never be collected on physical media except for a couple minor exceptions that we'll get into for a specific reason, nor has it appeared on any specific streaming service apart from YouTube, where you can watch, anything, whenever you feel like it. While I can't find any information on the creative team and the episode directors don't stand out in a that guy fashion, the voice cast has some fun names attached to it.
Stop them, Arcane! That canister's leaking radiation!
Len Carson, who voiced Swamp Thing himself, was huge in Marvel's early animation phases of the 1960s in nearly everything they put out, but for kids of a certain age, he will always be Senator Kelly from the X-Men the Animated Series. I heard the voice and I knew it instantly in a Member Berries nostalgia memory kind of way. Don Franks, who plays villain Arcane, is right there too, as he has voiced hundreds of characters over his career, including the entire run of the Police Academy cartoon, which of course also nicely fits in our not for kids criteria. But also for our audience, Franks was the chief in the original My Bloody Valentine.
What damn party?
Richard Yearwood is, well, for me anyway, known as Rick from the video game Dino Crisis, which is the best dino video game ever, and Harley Atkin, as we mentioned in the previous episode, was Bowser for a good long time. Tabitha St. Germain, who plays the younger and good Arcane, is voice royalty, specifically in the world of My Little Pony. The show itself fell victim to, well, just not catching on, and gets what I think is unfair heat from places like Watch Mojo, which ranks it in its top 10 worst kids' cartoons ever. In reality, it's really not that different from any other kids' show from the era. It has a crisp, if at parts janky animation style, fun, kid-relatable heroes and villains, and a catchy damn theme song. The song in particular stands out to me because it's a riff of Wild Thing by the Trogs, but with Swamp Thing and his adventures in the lyrics. The show jumps right into things with Swamp Thing emerging from his home and immediately be attacked by what we will later learn are Dr. Arcane's Unmen. These are former humans who were experimented on to become creatures, and even though they are monstrous, they're also bright and colorful. The gimmick in the show has Swamp Thing as a former scientist who keeps journals about how long he's been this way and comments on what's happened in each episode. Arcane is a scientist who's obsessed with eternal life and wants to capture Swamp Thing even after we learn in a flashback that it was his fault to begin with. The pilot does give us that at least, as after getting right into the action, the story is told from Arcane's stepdaughter of how Swamp Thing was created, and she tells 2 kids, and the kids at home, that Swamp Thing's actually a good guy.
Monsters don't keep journals. He's a brilliant scientist named Dr. Alec Holland.
The 5 episodes all revolve around Arcane trying to capture Swampy, or in one case rescue him from capture for further capture.
Swamp Thing is mine!
As well as things like environmental protection, nuclear fears, other kidnappings, tolerance, and oddly a focus on indigenous people. One episode involves Arcane putting an entire Amazon tribe into slavery to find something, and one of Swamp Thing's allies is a Native American named Tomahawk. Of course, there's a good guy team which involves Tomahawk, Swamp Thing, the kids, Arcane's stepdaughter Abby, and Vietnam War veteran Bayou Jack, and a bad guy team, which is Arcane, who is mutated in the first episode by the way, and his unknown including Weed Killer, Skin Man, and Dr. Demo, who all fit into this universe well, but could also have shown up in any number of 90s Mortal Kombat clones. For the record, I spelled clones with a K because it's Mortal Kombat, so I kinda have to. This set up a very aggressive marketing campaign for Swamp Thing like we had not seen before or since, for that character or really for any other show.
And we must get it back before he finds a way to harness its deadly power.
This included a line of Kenner toys because if you didn't have Kenner toys, were you even a kids show in the 90s? These toys are really fun, and we got all kinds of different versions of Swamp Thing, as well as the various bad guys and some vehicles. While the show only had 5 episodes, the legacy of the toys was larger, and this was one of the only instances of physical media release, as the first episode was put on a VHS tape and packaged with a Swamp Thing variant. These toys were a big part of my childhood and are collector's items that routinely show up on eBay. Much like Toxic Crusaders, Swamp Thing would also get the video game treatment, hilariously in December of 1992, which would be well after the short run ended. These games would be released on NES and Game Boy and are mostly terrible, with the Game Boy version being much more playable than the NES version, but being able to be beaten in less than 40 minutes. I mean, heck, the Tiger Electronics handheld version is probably a better investment than the NES game if we're being honest. Quite the legacy for a 5-episode cartoon show. This show is pretty fun, and I'm genuinely bummed it didn't get more than the 5 episodes it got. There was actually a DVD release that, well, it went away quickly, and then a UK-only release later, but even with the very horror show revival a few years ago, this show remains in the swamp. It's a really fun example of how a kid's show can blur the line on a horror property and make it much more marketable. But it was also an example of how quickly a kid's cartoon could fail in a sea of kids' cartoons in the 90s. Swamp Thing is worth a run due to its short nature and is a fun share if you have kids to your own to show it to. Just be prepared to look online secondhand to buy the toys, and good luck getting that theme song out of your head. Swamp Thing, you are amazing.
Swamp Thing! You are amazing!
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.